Never go to the second location. Always trust your gut.
Hello, my name is Chrissy Champagne, and you are listening to Residue, a true crime podcast dedicated to keeping you paranoid. And today, we are going to be talking about a movie that revolved around paranoia. So I thought today we wouldn't go the true crime route. You know that sometimes we do tragedy on set. We talk about cursed films, and today we will be talking about Rosemary's Baby, quite possibly the most cursed film in Hollywood. I don't know. I'm going to let you guys decide by the end of this. And you know, I always say we're taking a true crime break when I talk about these cursed film sets, but can't really take a true crime break when you talk about Rosemary's Baby because you've got to talk about the Tate LaBianca murders. And before we get started, as you guys know, you can follow me on Instagram at Residue Podcast, TikTok at Residue a True Crime Podcast, and Facebook at Residue a True Crime Podcast. And as always, the greatest thing you can do for any podcaster that you love is leave a positive review. And again, this week, I want to read to you another review. And listen, I'm just going to read positive reviews here on the podcast because let me tell you, I get some pretty nasty comments. I get some awful reviews sometimes, but you know what? Who the hell cares? Because they are nothing compared to the amount of love that I am receiving from you. And we always focus on the positive here. So this review, I read it one night when I was lying in bed and I was not having the greatest day. And I was just like, oh my God, thank you. It's 5 stars. They wrote, binge this. I love this show in capital letters. Her voice is enchanting and engaging, and she is a true storyteller. Once I started listening, it quickly became my go-to. I'm like reading that and I'm starting to feel a little like, oh my God, I'm reading something about myself. And it feels so strange, you know what I mean? But it also feels so good because you put so much work into this, and I do this all by myself, and it can get really stressful and it can be overwhelming, but it's so amazing when you get feedback like this. So thank you so much. That was amazing. It's especially nice to read on weeks like this when I've been feeling sick for the past couple of weeks, so I've really been having to push myself to get everything done. And I see stuff like that and I'm like, okay, come on, we got to do this. We got to go. It's go time. So before we begin this week's creepy, cursed-filled film set episode, I just want to warn you that listener discretion is advised. When Rosemary's Baby premiered in 1968, it felt less like a movie and more like a warning, because at this time, America was reeling. We had the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., JFK, there was cult paranoia, there was the rise of the occult in mainstream culture, and here was this film about a pregnant woman betrayed by her husband and surrounded by smiling Satanists who lived next door. Basically, this film was asking the question, what if evil isn't lurking in the shadows all scary, but it's just hiding in plain sight? You know, eyes wide shut. And within a year of its release, real-life horror would attach itself to this film in ways so eerie that many people began asking, is this film cursed? So, was it a curse or was it a coincidence wrapped in tragedy? My main source for today's episode is, of course, the docuseries Cursed Films. You can find that on Prime. They have many different movies that they explore. So let's talk about what 1968 in America was like. These were the types of conversations had at the dinner table. We were, as I said, talking about presidents, civil rights leaders falling to assassins, and the Vietnam War, LSD. Anton LaVey had just founded the Church of Satan. There were conversations about witchcraft and the occult. And into this world in 1968 comes this film about a woman raped and impregnated by the devil, and the neighbors next door helping make this happen. This film deals with paranoia, women's liberation, Catholicism, and the occult, and it is primarily set in New York City. So, All of the scenes filmed in Rosemary's Baby were actually filmed in New York City, but any of the interior scenes that you see, those scenes were filmed at Paramount Studios. And here's the thing about that I find super creepy. Paramount Studios is actually a former cemetery. So Hollywood Memorial Park is actually right behind Paramount Studios. And the park, the cemetery, used to be a lot bigger than it actually is. And in the early 1910s, this cemetery was cut in half and one side of it was sold to Hollywood Studios, and Paramount Studios was created. So people believe that there are actual corpses underneath this studio. Okay, let's break down the plot of Rosemary's Baby, starring Mia Farrow and John Cassavetes. A young wife comes to believe that her offspring is not of this world. Wayfish Rosemary Woodhouse and her struggling actor husband, Guy, move to a New York City apartment building with an ominous reputation and very odd neighbors named Roman and Minnie Castavet. When Rosemary becomes pregnant, she becomes increasingly isolated, and the diabolical truth is revealed only after Rosemary gives birth. The movie is based on the novel written by Ira Levin, released in 1967, and this was a bestseller at the time. It was regarded as a genuine masterpiece of literature, so you can imagine how everyone in Hollywood wanted to be the one to direct this movie. Now, there was this producer and director named William Castle. He was known for these amazing low-budget horror films, and he was the first one to initially acquire the rights for this adaptation. He even wrote to Paramount Studios, and he wanted to be the guy that put Rosemary's Baby on the screen. And he was just absolutely devastated when they gave this direction to Roman Polanski. He was this newest up-and-coming director at the time. And just for a little full disclosure, when I was in high school, I took a cinema class, and I did not realize that there were classes on cinema at this time in the very early 90s. I was so excited to take this class, and this is where I learned about Roman Polanski. I first saw the movie Two Men and a Wardrobe, which was a black and white silent film, and it blew my mind. I was obsessed with this director. I just couldn't get enough of any Roman Polanski movie. And then I found out what he did years later. So I had this gift of always choosing these artists and directors, filmmakers, singers, actors, anyone who I really grew to love and loved their work. And then I found out, not a lot of them are the greatest people on earth. So some films you might be familiar with that Roman Polanski directed. Of course, there's Chinatown, Rosemary's Baby, The Pianist, The Ninth Gate. Death and the Maiden was one of my all-time favorites. I had the poster on my wall. Bitter Moon is also a top favorite of mine. Frantic, The Tenant. We had Cul-de-sac, Repulsion, Macbeth, Knife in the Water. So people said when Polanski directed Rosemary's Baby, he was trying to expose us to questions of evil within ourselves. Just a quick little background on Roman Polanski. He was born in 1933 in Paris, but he grew up mostly in Poland. He survived the Holocaust. His mother was murdered at Auschwitz, and his father survived Nazi labor camps, experiences that deeply scarred Polanski, and this is what influenced his art. And he became this highly regarded filmmaker, known for the classics that I previously listed. And believe me, although I found this filmmaker while I was in high school and I did not know what he did after he became this, celebrated director in Hollywood. It was the 90s. I didn't have Google. I didn't know at first. So I'm not trying to glorify him in any way. I'm just giving you a little background, because when you talk about Rosemary's Baby and the curse, this part of Polanski's life often comes up because, his real life was horrifying, and it adds to this really creepy image attached to this movie. Jacqueline Castle, she's a filmmaker. She observed that in the movie Rosemary's Baby, Rosemary is always guided by older men. Like, she's always questioning what is going on, and there's always an older man that comes into the scene and grabs her by under her arm and walks her out of the room, and they gaslight her and they control her. They sort of try to mold her. And this reflects 1960s patriarchal structure. But it also, isn't that the kind of shit that goes on nowadays too? You know what I mean? But Polanski was really showing that in the movie by having these men grab her from under her arm, walk her out of doctor's offices and tell her she's just mistaken. Nothing's wrong with her. She must just have pregnancy brain, you know? Something else to look for while you watch this film is there are many times you can see Sammy Davis Jr.'s 1965 autobiography, Yes, I Can, the story of Sammy Davis Jr. They highlight this book a couple of times in the film. And it's highlighted because of the themes of modern culture and celebrity contrasting with the occult while subtly referencing the Rat Pack connection to Frank Sinatra, who was married to Mia Farrow at the time. So Mia Farrow is reading this book, Yes, I Can, on her couch shortly before she's interrupted by her neighbors. And, they're Satanist. And the significance is that the choice of book is actually considered ironic because Sammy Davis Jr. was associated with the Church of Satan during this era in 1968. And that aligned with the film's themes of cults and, in this case, a devil child. I mean, sometimes you think you're just watching a movie, but you are not. And as I always say, directors do not just place certain things in scenes for no reason at all. They are doing that on purpose to make you open up your mind. Because yes, ladies and gentlemen, Sammy Davis Jr. had a secret satanic past. So Polanski was adding in all of these little tidbits to open your eyes to different things like the celebrities in Hollywood and the occult. He also added a little Volkswagen white Beetle that was following behind Mia Farrow in many scenes. So look out for that little V-dub bug because Mia Farrow was associated with the Beatles at one point. Her sister and her would travel around and go on tour with the Beatles. In fact, many lyrics that the Beatles wrote are about Mia Farrow and her sister. And her sister's name is Prudence Farrow, and the song Dear Prudence is about Mia's sister. Cool facts, Chrissy, cool fun facts, but what exactly does that have to do with the curse of the movie? Well, Mia Farrow, friends with the Beatles, knows John Lennon. John Lennon lived in the Dakota. The Dakota is the building that is featured in Rosemary's Baby. And the Dakota is the building that John Lennon was shot in front of years later after this movie was released. Now, John Lennon and the Beatles also wrote the White Album and Helter Skelter. And the White Album and Helter Skelter were Charles Manson's obsessions, and he was most obsessed with the White Album, believing that it contained coded messages that instructed him to commit the murders, including the 1969 killing of Roman Polanski's wife, Sharon Tate. After this film was made, bad things started happening in people's lives. Anyone who worked on the crew, the cast, things started happening. So let's go through a list of some creepy stuff that started happening to these people. Christoph Komeda, he is a jazz musician. He worked on the movie Cul-de-sac. He also worked on Knife in the Water, and he wrote the lullaby for Rosemary's Baby, Rosemary's Lullaby. It's one of the most iconic themes in any horror movie ever. And after this film premiered, in December of 1968, Roman Polanski was drinking with his friend Komeda and another writer, and these guys started roughhousing, and Komeda fell and hit his head. And now, after hitting his head, he developed a hematoma on his head and died 3 months later. In the film, Rosemary's Baby, there is a character named Hutch who also falls into a coma and dies 3 months after falling into that coma. As you will see, there were just so many little things inside of the film that were foreshadowing the horrific events that were going to happen years later. Now, in the docuseries Cursed Films, they talk about something called a God wink, and this is something where if a coincidence happens and it's a good coincidence, it means that God is winking at you. But with this movie, they call this a devil wink movie because so many bad things were happening, and it's almost like the devil was winking to let you know that you were on the wrong path. Now, earlier we spoke of William Castle, the director and producer who really wanted to be the one to direct Rosemary's Baby. He was the kind of man that people just adored, and he loved to scare the hell out of people. So William Castle starts going through some pretty awful stuff. His kidneys stop working. He has to go into emergency surgery. And while he's in surgery, he is convinced while laying on that table that when he looked up and saw the surgeon with his knife, he saw the image of a devil or the devil inside of that surgeon's knife. And at this point, the movie has premiered, and the Catholic Church is condemning this movie, and all of the people involved with the movie were receiving just like tons of hate mail. And William Castle was getting a lot of hate mail, and he couldn't comprehend how to deal with this. It was really affecting him, and he would think to himself, what did I bring into this world when I made this movie? Now, on the docuseries, his daughter speaks, and she talks about the fact that, okay, we could call this the Rosemary's Baby curse, or we could call it a coincidence, because she goes on to explain that she is the daughter of William Castle. Her baby died of cancer at a very young age. Then her sister died. Then her mom developed Alzheimer's. So she goes on to say, so is this a curse? So William Castle, her father, loses a grandchild, a daughter, and his wife. And then he gets really sick and thinks he sees the image of a devil. So she doesn't know what to believe. And then, of course, in 1969, only 1 year after the film premiered, Sharon Tate was murdered inside of her home. And she was pregnant with Roman Polanski's baby. The Tate LaBianca murders, it's one of the most brutal true crime stories in all of history. It's horrifying, and we can go much deeper into that story when we cover the made-for-TV movie Helter Skelter. So the Tate LaBianca murders happened August 8th, 1969. 5 people were found brutally massacred inside of the Polanski Tate home. Now, I want to give you a little background that they talk about on the Cursed films. This happened in Benedict Canyon. And so Benedict Canyon is this little stretch in Hollywood where, oh my goodness gracious, the amount of bad things that have happened in this little neighborhood. I'm going to go through some of them for you. So, actor Peter Finch. Now, if you start at the beginning of Benedict Canyon, you're at the very bottom of the hill. There is the Beverly Hills Hotel. And then you just go up the hill all the way to the top where the Sharon Tate and LaBianca murders happened. So we'll start at the Beverly Hills Hotel. Peter Finch, he died in the lobby of the hotel right before he was about to win an Academy Award. He was the first actor to ever win the posthumous Best Actor in the movie Network. And then you go a little bit up the road, and right up there is where Richard Dreyfuss got into a car crash that nearly killed him. Across the street from where that car crash happened, Charo, she lived in a home where her husband went into an alley behind their house and he killed himself. And then right up the street from there, Elizabeth Montgomery from the TV show Bewitched, she lived in a home there and also died in that home. And across the street from her home, a little up the road, was John Ritter's home, where he died. We had George Reeve, Superman, also died in that neighborhood. Susan Berman, you might know the name from the Robert Durst murders, the Jinx documentary. She was also murdered in Benedict Canyon. Yvette Vickers, she was a B movie star actress, and her mummified body was found in her home. She died inside of her home in Benedict Canyon, and no one knew she had passed away. She was seen in such movies as Attack of the 50-Foot Woman. There's also Paul Byrne and Jean Harlow, who lived in a home, and Paul killed himself. And then we have Cielo Drive, where the Tate murders take place. On August 8th, 1969, Sharon Tate was home, pregnant, alone. Her husband, Roman Polanski, was traveling. He was in London filming, and he was supposed to be home, but he didn't. He was late, and she was a little upset about it. So Sharon goes out to dinner with some friends. She dined with Jay Sebring, Ostrich Frykowski, and Abigail Folger. They return from dinner and they sit at Sharon Tate's home, and by midnight, they were murdered by members of the Manson family cult. Their bodies are not discovered until the following morning when the housekeeper, Winifred Chapman, arrived on the scene, and they also find another man named Stephen Parent in the driveway in his car, shot dead. So inside of the house, it was a massacre. The bodies of Sharon and Jay were found with this long rope that had been thrown over a beam and then tied around each of their necks, connecting them. The bodies of Abigail Folger and then Frykowski were found outside on the lawn. All of the victims had been stabbed numerous times except for Stephen Parent, who was found outside. And the coroner said that Sharon Tate had been stabbed 16 times and that 5 of the wounds were in and of themselves fatal. So Life magazine actually published these photos of the crime scene, and they featured the photos of the crime scene. And Roman Polanski was interviewed for the article. He also allowed himself to be photographed at the entrance of his house next to the door where the word pig was still visible. They wrote the word pig in Sharon Tate's own blood. And Roman was actually, people criticized the hell out of him for this photo shoot, but he said that he needed to be there. He needed to see why this happened, how this happened. Like, he needed to see all of it for himself. He was basically saying, though, that he did this because they still didn't know who murdered his wife and his unborn child and his friends. And he thought that maybe if he comes forward and he has this article done and he does these pictures, maybe somebody will come forward with some information. Polanski became paranoid. He went crazy. He started to blame everyone, suspect everyone, all of his friends, all of his associates. Now, Polanski became so paranoid that he even asked William Castle, who worked with him on Rosemary's Baby, to come to his house, sit down, and write the word pig over and over and over. And William did. And he said it was the creepiest thing that has ever happened to him. And Polanski had all of that analyzed because he suspected everybody. And then in September of 1969, members of the Manson family were arrested, and they were arrested on unrelated charges. But this is what eventually led authorities to the breakthrough on the Tate case. And they explained that the motives for the murders, it wasn't the identity of the victims. It was because they were at the right address. But at this point, the wrong people lived there because this place used to be rented to record producer Terry Melcher. And that is actually who Manson was after. Because here's the thing, just like we said, all of the foreshadowing in Rosemary's Baby, everything to do with the Beatles, the Dakota, the V-dub, Manson was obsessed with the Beatles, and he took a sick inspiration from the Beatles, Helter Skelter. So, according to a History.com article, members of Manson's cult, known as the Manson family, they carried out this string of brutal murders. And it wasn't just the Sharon Tate murders. It included Leno and Rosemary LaBianca 2 days later. And then musician Gary Hinman and horse wrangler Donald Shea. They were also murdered in separate instances, and the words death to pigs and rise were written in LaBianca's blood on his living room walls, while Helter Skelter was scrawled in blood on the refrigerator door. So Manson tried to explain his motivation for these murders, and it was such a bizarre explanation. He says it's the Beatles, the music they're putting out. He said this while he was on death row at age 83 in 2017. He said, these kids listen to this music and pick up messages. It's subliminal. It is not my music. I hear what it relates. It says rise. It says kill. Why blame it on me? I didn't write the music. A former federal prosecutor, a legal analyst, and the author of Hunting Charles Manson, Liz Wheel, she says that Manson's primary way of preaching to his followers was by playing his guitar and singing lyrics by both himself and the Beatles, and he convinced his cult members that the Beatles' music was, particularly the song Helter Skelter, containing subliminal messaging to convince them to commit violence. She goes on to say that in the Beatles, Manson sees things that he desperately wanted, like worldwide respect, stardom, and of course, money. And Manson is a struggling artist at this time. To put it nicely, had none of the above, had no worldwide respect, no stardom, no money, and was desperate to make a name for himself in the music industry in LA in the late 1960s. Now, the night of the murders, there was another person that was supposed to be at Sharon Tate's house who did not go, and her name was Victoria Vetri. Victoria Vetri played a very small role in Rosemary's Baby. And now, knowing that she was supposed to be at the house that night, Victoria, she did not want to go outside of her house at all after these murders happened. She became reclusive. She was very paranoid. She bought herself a gun. Now, Victoria was this, Playboy playmate. She was up and coming. She was starring in some small films. She had a small role in Rosemary's Baby. Now, really quickly, here's some trivia for you on Rosemary's Baby. Victoria Vetri is actually in the film, but she goes by the name Angela Dorian. And now there is this friendly exchange. It's a scene near the beginning of the film where Mia Farrow meets this young woman in the apartment building in the laundry room, and she's staring at her. And in the scene, Victoria is actually wearing a wig. And Rosemary looks at her and says, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I thought that you were the actress Victoria Vetri." And the woman says, "Yeah, I know. I get that a lot." And then she introduces herself as Terry Gianofrio. And the inside joke is that the woman is actually Victoria Vetri. She was billed in the credits as Angela Dorian because that's the name that she used when she posed for Playboy. I just thought that was a nice little tidbit about the movie to add in. And also, Victoria didn't have the greatest time in life after this movie. Now, she became super paranoid because she was supposed to be at the house the night the murders happened. So she ends up, going on with her life. Everything seems fine. She marries this man. So she is charged with attempted murder when she allegedly shoots her husband of 25 years, Bruce Rathgeb, at close range in their Hollywood apartment on October 16th, 2010. And on September 7th, 2011, after pleading no contest to charges of attempted voluntary manslaughter, she was sentenced to 9 years in prison. She was released on parole in April 2018. She was 73 years old. And on the docuseries Cursed Films, they have an interview with her and what I believe to be her new boyfriend. They live together. He's a bit younger than her. She makes some jokes about how, she has a young guy in her life now, and she is losing her memory in that interview. It's pretty sad to see. She doesn't really remember a lot. She doesn't remember who Mia Farrow was, but then she'll suddenly go, "Oh yes, I remember her. She was a nice lady." Life did not get any better for Roman Polanski. In March of 1977, he was arrested in Los Angeles and charged with multiple offenses related to an encounter with a 13-year-old girl named Samantha. And these charges included drugging and raping her, unlawful sexual intercourse with a minor, perversion, sodomy, furnishing a controlled substance to a minor. And this case stemmed from a photo shoot he arranged with the young girl's mother, consent given by the young girl's mother under the guise of Vogue magazine work. And Samantha later testified that she felt uncomfortable and she was plied with drugs and alcohol before Roman Polanski raped her. Now, Polanski ultimately entered a plea deal in which he pled guilty to 1 count of unlawful sexual intercourse with a minor, and as part of this plea deal, he was ordered to undergo a 90-day psychiatric evaluation at Chino State Prison, and he was released after about 42 days, less than half the evaluation period, and probation was expected. However, when it became clear that the judge intended to impose a much harsher sentence than initially agreed, Polanski fled the United States in early 1978, just before the sentencing hearing. And he never returned, and therefore never served the expected probation or any further sentence. Because of this flight, the U.S. issued a warrant and an Interpol notice for his arrest. Polanski has since lived primarily in France which generally does not extradite its citizens to the U.S. In 2013, Samantha, she published a memoir titled The Girl, A Life in the Shadow of Roman Polanski, and she shared her own account of what happened and how it shaped her life. She also said that she wants this legal case to be closed and has spoken out about moving on, though she has also acknowledged the lasting effects of this experience. In 1971, Mia Farrow married composer Andre Previn, and together they had 3 biological sons and adopted 3 daughters from Vietnam. And that marriage lasted about a decade, ending in 1979. And then in 1980, Mia began a long personal and professional partnership with filmmaker Woody Allen, and their relationship brought her some of her most acclaimed roles, but it ended in scandal. Because in 1992, Mia Farrow discovered that Woody Allen was having an affair with her adopted daughter, Soon-Yi Previn. And the breakup triggered a high-profile custody battle, allegations of abuse, and this was widely covered in the media and explored in the documentary Allen vs. Farrow, 2021. According to an NBC News article in 2021, Mia Farrow took to Twitter to address, quote, vicious rumors about the deaths of 3 of her 14 children. She wrote, "Few families are perfect, and any family who has suffered the loss of a child knows that pain is merciless and ceaseless. However, some vicious rumors based on untruths have appeared online concerning the lives of my 3 children. And to honor their memory, their children, and every family that has dealt with the death of a child, I am posting this message." Mia goes on to explain the circumstances surrounding the deaths of her 3 children, Tam, Lark, and Thaddeus. She wrote that Tam passed away at age 17 from an accidental prescription drug overdose related to agonizing migraines that she suffered and her heart ailment. She said that Lark, who was an extraordinary woman and a wonderful daughter, sister, partner, and mother to her own children, died at age 35 from complications of HIV and AIDS, which she contracted from a previous partner. And then Thaddeus died at age 29. He was living with his partner, and the family was anticipating a wedding. But when the relationship abruptly ended, he took his own life. And Mia wrote that these are unspeakable tragedies, and any other speculation about their deaths is to dishonor their lives and the lives of their children that loved them. What do you think about all of the devastation, the brutal murders, the heartbreak that surrounded the filmmakers and the cast of this movie, Rosemary's Baby? Do you believe what William Castle, director and producer, asked? What did we bring into this world? Do you believe that they brought something evil into this world when they made Rosemary's Baby? Stay safe and stay paranoid. Residue is created, hosted, written, researched, edited, and produced by me, Chrissy Champagne.